Hi everyone! So today we're going to be taking a look at 10 plants that I will never own again. I will never sell again. I'm not going to carry these in my rare plant inventory for my rare plant pop-up shops anymore, and the reasons why vary a bit, but in general it has to do with growth patterns and just growth issues in general. And as we go through the plants today, I will of course explain more what I mean. But when I originally started putting this list together, I just started thinking about plants that I would put on this list, just happened to end up being exactly 10. And when I went back and kind of looked at the list as a whole, I was kind of shocked how many philodendron are on this list. And I just want to be clear up front, I'm not a philodendron hater. Some of my favorite plants that I own are philodendron. But there's a lot of problems with some philodendrons that I've experienced personally and that I know that a lot of other people have. So we're going to go through this basically in no particular order, but I am going to leave the one plant on this list that was just, the first one that came to mind when I started thinking about plants I would never own again. I'm going to save that for the number one spot. Now, I do not own all of these plants. Do I own any of these plants right now? I think I have 2 of the plants on this list still in rare plant inventory because I've just been trying to clear them out. And unfortunately, I haven't been able to, and I'll explain why when we get to those. But for the most part, I don't have any of these anymore. So I will be flashing up on screen for you examples of what these plants can look like. And I want to show you what they can look like because I feel like this is where people go wrong sometimes with buying plants is we see examples on social media of people who have successfully grown these plants. They aren't in the same environment as us. Maybe they got them as a more mature plant than what we can get them as, and we see it, we covet it, we want it because we want it to look like that, and it is just not what happens when we get those plants. So let's go ahead and get started with the Philidendrin Ring of Fire. This plant is an absolutely stunning plant. It's got these gorgeous serrated edged leaves, has this beautiful variegation on it. Now, the variegation can tend to vary a lot from plant to plant, but if you get one that is highly variegated, it tends to stay pretty variegated, well variegated pretty easily. However, the biggest problem with the Philidendrin Ring of Fire is that this thing is a complete and total space hog. It is called a ring of fire for a reason. The thing forms a giant circle if you just have it growing in a regular pot, not trying to put it on a pole or anything like that. Now, I have had people come at me in the comments of one of my past videos for stating that the Philidendrin Ring of Fire is more of an upright growth pattern philodendron than a climber. It can climb, okay? But it does not start out as like readily being a climber. It is not some kind of crazy fast climber. It wants to grow in that more upright pattern and it creates that giant circle. The leaves are really long and it takes up a ton of space. Now, if you can successfully get it to start growing on a moss pole, you will lose not even half though, honestly, you guys, not even half of the circumference because those leaves on the side will still kind of fan out a bit, but it can help. But honestly, the leaves get so big and size up so quickly, especially if you're going to try to attach it to a moss pole, that they're just going to get longer on the side that is still circular and it's just going to take up more space. So for that reason, this plant has no business with me owning it, honestly. And I don't even want to carry it in my rare plant inventory anymore because I feel like a lot of people have come to the same conclusion. And now I feel like it's one of those plants that was just super popular when it first came out. And now like hardly anybody talks about them or wants them or owns them anymore, probably because we've all experienced this issue. And also I will say, when I had them in my rare plant inventory, every time I would go to pick it up to water, plants would get knocked over because that thing just, once again, total space hog. But up next, let's talk about the Philidendrin Pink Princess. And I kind of want to group into this philodendron hybrids that are hybrids between climbers and upright growth pattern philodendrons in general, because what I'm about to describe to you, it happens with a lot of those hybrids, but it just for whatever reason is a worse issue on the Pink Princess than any of the rest of them. And I can't even begin to tell you why. I don't know. And I can't honestly figure out quite if it's the genetics from the climbing part of it, of the hybrid, or the upright part of the hybrid that are causing the issue. But for whatever reason, Philidendrin Pink Princess looks gorgeous in the stores, especially those new marbled ones that have come out. Absolutely love them. Stunning, stunning plant. If you like pink, definitely a great plant for you. if you can handle the growth pattern. Now, the good news is you don't really need to put these on a moss pole. They seem to do okay on just a regular pole. You can put them on a moss pole if you want to, but I'm here to tell you right now, I have not seen that drastic of a difference in how they grow for somebody who has them on a moss pole versus somebody who just has them on a regular support with no moss in it. But the issue with the Philodendron Pink Princess and a lot of these hybrids are twofold. One, they're notorious for having their leaves get stuck when they're trying to unfurl. I have 2 such hybrids left. I don't have a Pink Princess, but I do have my Philodendron Red Anderson, which honestly, out of all of these philodendron hybrids, that are hybrids between climbers and upright philodendron, my Red Anderson has had the least problems with this. Now, its new leaves do get stuck coming in quite frequently, but they get stuck in a way that's really easy to unstick them. And the leaves just grow great for me. They're not causing me size up issues or anything like that. It just has done the best for me out of all the ones that I have taken care of. The Philodendron Pink Princess, on the other hand, the leaves tend to get stuck almost immediately, and it's like they are trapped in there hardcore. It is like the petiole does not want to let go of that leaf. I don't even know. I know I've shared it before with you guys. There's been that meme that goes around about philodendron stuck leaves looking like the evil stepsister in Cinderella when she tries to squeeze her foot that's way too big into the glass slipper. And that's legit what it looks like. And sometimes you won't even notice there's a new leaf coming in and that it's been stuck until it's already snapped itself off, because it's so stuck that just the base of the petiole kind of starts to arch up like that. And if you don't catch it right away and try to do something to help it, which quite frequently on a Pink Princess, nothing I have tried to do has helped it. That's one of the reasons it's on this list. It will break off and that new leaf just stays stuck in that petiole. Or you have the thing that can also happen sometimes where it doesn't fully unstick, but then it starts to form a new leaf, and now you've got a leaf stuck inside of a leaf stuck inside of a leaf. And that's an even more frustrating situation. So that is my first problem with Philodendron Pink Princesses. My second problem is that the leaves just come in smaller and smaller, no matter what I do. Doesn't matter what kind of conditions I give it. Doesn't matter if I'm giving it more fertilizer more regularly, giving it more humidity, nothing. I'm telling you, those leaves just want to go smaller and smaller, and it is so weird. And once again, my Philodendron Red Anderson is the only hybrid I've had that hasn't really happened with. Even my Philodendron White Princess I still have, the leaves, they're coming in about the same size that they always have, which is better than the Pink Princess. At least they're not downsizing and becoming smaller, but they're also not getting any bigger. At least on the Red Anderson, they're increasing slightly in size as it continues to grow. But with those Pink Princesses, it's so ridiculous. And the other thing that I tend to see happen a lot with these, you guys, I am terribly sorry. If you can hear all this noise in the background, there is a thunderstorm rolling in, but unfortunately, this is the only time today I had to film. So my apologies if there's a lot of thunder and like water hitting the window, but we're gonna manage. But a similar hybrid that I do want to talk about that I also specifically put on this list of plants that I will never own or carry in inventory to sell again is the Philodendron Strawberry Shake. Oh my goodness. Okay, same basic problems as your Philodendron Pink Princess. I will say the leaves actually don't get stuck quite as easily on the Philodendron Strawberry Shake in my experience, but they just do not want to size up, and it is the slowest growing out of these Philodendron hybrids that I have ever experienced in my life. Like, hold on, I just realized I actually do have 3 of the plants on this list. I have one I can show you as an example. Okay, so I actually have 2 of these left in rare plant inventory right now, and they didn't look like this when I first got them. They looked absolutely fabulous when I first got them. They were just baby plants. The leaves were all about this size and beautifully variegated, which by the way, that one is beautifully variegated. That is another issue I have with this plant I will talk about in a second about why you can't really tell it's variegated, and it's just another interesting feature to this plant that I think a lot of people don't understand, but we'll get to that in a second. But I've had this for well over a year, and it has given me hardly any new growth, and in the process, it has killed off a bunch of its old leaves, which is not surprising because after a while, old leaves just get old and die off, which is usually not a problem unless your plant is only producing a few tiny new leaves, I don't know, once every few months. The thing is so slow to grow, you guys. I have tried repotting it to check and see if maybe there was an issue with the roots. There wasn't. I have tried chopping the other one I have and propagating the top of it, and letting it grow back on the other one. And that was a bad idea because that one's got, I think it's only got 2 leaves like this too. It did sprout a second vine on that one when I chopped it, but that vine only has 1 leaf and it's been a year since I chopped it. The top part of it took forever to root and I was so over it by the time it did. I just sold it to someone as like a rooted cutting for I think $2 because I just didn't want to deal with it anymore. That is where I'm at with these plants. Now, another interesting thing that I think a lot of people don't realize about this, and so I started having issues selling these, is that this plant sun stresses big time. I honestly have never seen a philodendron sun stress. Okay, the weather's getting a little bit worse, you guys. If I have to take a break, I will take a break, but I'm going to try to power through it here. So sun stressing on these is something I have not really experienced much on other philodendrons, and it's not getting a ton of light. This is just in my IKEA greenhouse cabinet. It's a short plant, so it's not near the lights. Nobody else in the greenhouse cabinet is sun stressed, but this coloring you're seeing, this kind of reddish coloring, that is just from the light. And to get rid of that, I would have to put it in such a dark situation, it would kind of worry me that it wasn't going to use up its water properly enough. Now, I have tried moving them into lower light situations. It did resolve the sun stressing issue, but it didn't change the growth rate or anything like that. But this is what throws people for a loop because they think it's not variegated. But if that sun stressing went away, all that pink is actually cream colored. Everywhere you see that pink is cream colored. And there's only a little bit of green. Hopefully you can see it on that leaf kind of mostly up there at the top. So it looks like a beautifully variegated plant when it's not sun stressed, but nobody thinks it's variegated, so then nobody wants to buy it. I'm just so over this plant. Actually, I kind of feel like now that I'm sitting here talking about this, this one's actually a little bit worse, in my opinion, than the Philodendrin Pink Princess, just because it grows like astronomically slower. I mean, the Pink Princess is slow, but this is really slow. So for that reason, I will not be carrying, owning, selling any Philodendron strawberry shakes ever again. But let's move on to one of the, I think there are 2 Monsteras. Yes, 2 Monsteras on this list. The first one I want to talk about is the Monstera escalto. Now, this plant hit the scene probably close to 2 years ago now. Big time. Like, it was popping up in stores. They were relatively large sized plants. The leaves on them were probably about this big. They were beautifully fenestrated. It was like a giant version of a Monstera adansonii. People saw them, people loved them, people bought them. They were all, at least in my area, around like $100 for these plants, but they were relatively large plants. People felt okay about it. And now I feel like people are over the Monstera escalto. I am over the Monstera escalto because I actually acquired one in a plant trade with somebody that first year that they came out. And I learned real fast that these plants have to be grown on a pole. They have to be grown on a moss pole. They need something to root into. If you just give them a regular pole or you just don't give them a pole at all, they are going to put out crazy long runners, which are basically just vines with no leaf growth because they're just trying to find something that they can attach to and grow into before they will push out a new leaf. And so I'm talking on that plant, which I did at one point propagate into 2 plants, and same problem on both of them. But at one point I had a runner, I measured it, it was 6 feet long, not a single leaf on it, and that particular vine was so thick that it was thicker than my thumb. So a vine as thick as my thumb, or a little thicker than my thumb, 6 feet long, no leaves. And I would cut it off, and then it would just start doing the same thing again. And every time I would cut that vine back, it would come in skinnier and skinnier and skinnier until, on a vine thicker than my thumb, I had a vine that was like basically, let's see if I have a cord here I can reference for you. I had a vine that was basically this thin coming off of a super thick vine. And so I was just getting more and more frustrated. And yeah, I basically decided no more Monstera escalto for me. And I think a lot of people just didn't realize that this was going to happen because honestly, when we first saw them hitting the scene, they looked like they were going to grow in a bit more of a bushy upright pattern. I don't know why people thought that was going to happen when it's a Monstera, and we know that Monsteras like to climb. And I will give this to this plant. Like, I don't want to be totally negative on it. It is one of the fastest growing Monsteras I have ever encountered in my entire life. That thing grows rapidly. But once again, if you don't have it on a pole with some kind of substrate where it can root into it, it is going to grow crazy fast, but it is not going to actually give you new leaves. And so I am 100% over it. I will also point out too, though, I know we have talked in the past that about monsteras in general sometimes taking a long time to actually root when you're trying to propagate them. The escalto does not take a long time at all. That thing is one of the fastest ones to propagate as well. It is literally like the fastest growing all around monstera, but man, you got to get it just right. And when you get it just right, they grow so fast. Good luck if you don't have room for them. Just saying. But up next, I do have, I guess I'll call it one Epiprennum on the list, but really it's a whole group of Epiprennum, and that is Epiprennum penatums. So what we have back here is a beautiful Epiprennum aureum. Absolutely love my aureums. So this is my pearls and jade, your neon pothos. All of these are commonly called pothos, as are the penatums, but your neon pothos, your marble queen pothos, your global green pothos, your manjula pothos, all of those are not penatums. I do not have a problem with any of those. I absolutely love those Epiprennum. The penatums, on the other hand, we're done. We are 100% done for basically the same reason that I was just talking about on the escalto of putting out runners if it's not climbing. And what really frustrates me about penatums, and I will use the Epiprennum penatum Cebu Blue because I just saw one recently in a video I did for you at one of my local nurseries in a hanging basket, trailing, looks gorgeous. I like Epiprennums that trail. And so for me, I originally had a Cebu Blue, I can talk, way back when. Also owned a Baltic Blue until about halfway through last year because I saw them in the store like this and I was like, oh, what a pretty trailing Epiprennum. Why would I not want one of these? So I get it, I bring it home, and yes, they will trail and look good like this to a certain length. And for me, that length was right about the bottom of the pot. As soon as they got to the bottom of the pot, it just became runner central. And every vine they put out just looked like a long skinny vine like this cord with no leaves in sight, and they would get feet long, like multiple feet long, and then I would cut them off hoping that would trigger some kind of leaf growth, whatever. No, it would just keep putting out these runners. And then the more I would cut the runners back, what I would start to see is a lot of the older leaves would die off and it's not replacing them with any new leaves. So then your plant starts to look kind of bald, it looks a little bit thin, and I'm just over it. I even tried at one point, you guys, to put my Baltic Blue on a pole, and not a moss pole, just a regular like coco coir pole, to see if that would help because it was tied to something, so it gave it that perception that it was climbing. No, still kept putting out runners. So I think in order to really get these ones to not give you runners and to perform well, I think they really want moss poles as well. Now this could also be an environmental condition. Maybe if I was in a way higher humidity, subtropical climate, maybe I could successfully grow them trailing without them putting out a lot of runners. But from what I've seen for most people, and please, by all means, this video is just based on my personal experiences, you guys. I probably should have stated that up front. If you've had different experiences, by all means, comment down below and let us know. But please mention like whereabouts you live. Like, we don't need your exact address or anything, but like South Florida, or I live in Southern Australia, whatever it may be, so that we have an idea of what your conditions are compared to ours to know if that's actually what the problem was. Because I think sometimes like some of us might read, you say, oh, well, it's the conditions, it needs, mine grows great, I live in a high humidity place. Well, some of us may think, oh, well, it must be my problem then. And then you say you live in, I don't know, maybe North Florida, and somebody who struggled with it lives in North Florida and is like, well, that's where I live and I'm having a problem, so it must not be humidity. So helping us know where you are kind of helps us troubleshoot collectively what the issue might be. But I am done with Epiprennum. Why am I struggling to say Epiprennum today, you guys? Penatums, that includes the Cebu Blue, the Baltic Blue, the Marble, what's the Albo. I've owned all of those, and yeah, I'm over it. Not carrying those anymore, not owning those anymore. Okay, up next we've got another Filidendrin. I absolutely adore this Filidendrin, the way it looks when you can successfully grow it. And I love the fact that this is a variegated Filidendrin that is actually stably variegated, which a lot of people incorrectly think it's not. because of the issues that I'm about to describe for you. So this is a Filidendrin paricio verde. Absolutely stunning variegated philodendron. It is a climber, beautiful green speckles on this kind of whitish colored leaf. Somewhat reminds me a little bit of the patterning on a Philodendrin ilsamanii, only loads cheaper than an ilsamanii. Stunning plant. I owned one of these at one point. It looked like this when I first got it as just a tiny plant that had, I think, maybe 3 little baby leaves. And then immediately I brought it home and the first leaf it put out was all green. The next leaf it put out was all green. And from there on, everything was all green. And this is the problem. A lot of people think this plant is not stably variegated, meaning that it can revert back to an all green plant, but it actually is stably variegated. Just because it puts out all green leaves on you doesn't mean that it can't start giving you variegated leaves again. And a lot of people just couldn't figure these plants out, and I feel like they went out of popularity super fast because of that. And the biggest issue with this plant is heat. You have to have a warm enough environment for it. I heard somebody tell me 23 degrees Celsius, which, let me convert that to Fahrenheit real quick, because you think I would be able to convert better on temperatures. I did live in Canada for a while. I never really got good at the whole temperature conversion thing. Okay, so I was thinking that was close to 75-ish. I wasn't that far off. It's 73.4 degrees in Fahrenheit. This is like bare minimum temperature that these plants want in order to variegate. And the warmer you get them above that, without going into 100 degrees Fahrenheit, you don't want to fry the plant to death, but the higher you get above that, between say that and 90, the better the variegation is going to be for you. But how many of us actually keep our houses consistently at that temperature all day long, every day? And in addition to that, you need to make sure that this plant is getting plenty of light to help maintain that variegation as well. Now I will say, from a growth pattern standpoint, grows pretty well. I did find that the petiole ratio was kind of a little bit long for me. Wasn't my favorite plant in that regard, but in general grew really well. Also didn't really need a moss pole in my experience, even though it's a climber. I did okay with just a regular support, but I just really wanted those beautiful variegated leaves, and it was just not happening in my home. Now, if I lived somewhere such as Southern Florida, where I could put this plant out on the patio in the nice warm weather, it would probably have done fabulously for me. But that is not my case here, and I do know some other people who have lived in warmer environments that have still struggled with this plant. I only see occasionally nowadays people who have really nice looking ones. So yeah, there's no point in me owning one of these anymore because I don't get the variegation that I love, and I don't want to sell them anymore because I feel like I'm selling a false promise. And if I buy them beautifully variegated and I don't sell them fast enough, then they're going to turn all green, and I'm going to be like, here's a paricio verde, and somebody's going to be like, that's not a paricio verde, that's an all green plant. And I'm going to be like, yeah, I could see why you think that, but I promise it's a paricio verde. So yeah, this one definitely not for me. Okay, so up next on our list, we have the only other Monstera on the list, and that is the Monstera standalliana, aka Monstera cobra. Now, this is a very different looking Monstera than most of the Monsteras people are used to seeing. It does have a longer, narrower leaf pattern. It has a little bit of white variegation on the ones that's actually called a standalliana. There are Aurea versions of this. There are more true albo versions of this, but they all have the same issue, and that is the growth pattern. I have one left in rare plant inventory, and I just recently kind of curled it around on itself because this is a plant that I, once again, feel like probably definitely needs a pole or a support of sorts to climb, even though it is kind of a smaller leafed Monstera, because if you do not give it something to climb, it is going to get just one scraggly vine like this. Like all Monsteras, for the most part, it does not like to bush out. It's not one of those plants where if I cut this, because I think I have cut this one. Oh no, must have been one of the other ones. Oh no, I did cut it right there. And when you cut it, it doesn't tend to pop off new growth further up at the top. Now, I have seen people who have lush, full, trailing baskets that aren't trailing super crazy of these, but I'm just those must just be 20 individual little plants in that pot because they do not want to bush out and create new vines. Now, another issue I've had with these is that they do also have a tendency to put out runners. That's why I had to cut this one, but also you'll see that internodal spacing there is pretty drastic. Now, I don't know for what reason, but it has started to put out leaves now more close together over here. If the camera will focus for me. Come on, camera. There we go. The leaves are definitely growing in more close over here now that it is trailing this far, but I don't know why. But this is a hot mess. Even if I put this on a pole right now, it looks crazy. I would have to chop it and prop it again. And my problem with chopping and propping it is the slowest freaking thing ever to root. I was mentioning earlier about the Philodendrin strawberry shakes not easily wanting to root. And this is like, I had so many of these that when I initially had gotten them, I had imported them from Aroid Asia. It was one of the shipments that got delayed for various reasons. And so the roots were pretty much shot. I had to remove all the rot from the plants that I had gotten. I had to put them all in water to propagate, which for most of my plants is fine. I do that with all my imports that I have issues with like that. They all grow roots, new roots relatively quickly. These sat there for like a year doing absolutely nothing before they finally started to put out some roots. I tried putting them in my IKEA greenhouse cabinet at one time for more humidity. It didn't help either. So it is a highly annoying plant in my personal opinion and my experience. Also, the variegation tends to be very finicky, so hopefully you can see there's not like a lot of variegation on that leaf, but the older leaves that are no longer there had way more variegation than that. So I don't know, I feel like the variegation is super unstable. It's just a wonky, weird growth pattern, and for that reason, yeah, not a plant I will ever own or be carrying in inventory again. Now, speaking of wonky growth patterns, and the next two plants I feel like are brother-sister, or brother-brother, or sister-sister to each other. They're both philodendrons, and they both just have like the same freaking problems, to the point that at the last rare plant inventory pop-up event that I did, somebody saw this first one I'm going to show you and thought it was the other one that we're going to talk about second. So the first one I want to talk about is the Filidendrin soldery. Now I'm going to show you what a good looking Filidendrin soldery looks like, a mature one. Definitely is a climbing philodendron, definitely will get large leaves. You definitely want to give it a pull. It just needs a pull. You'll understand even more so why here in a second. But my biggest problem with this plant is that these leaves just will not come in without getting stuck, torn, whatever it may be. They will semi-size up, like, I mean, they stay about the same size. So here's the best looking one I still have in rare plant inventory right now. And I chopped and propped this one and did kind of what I was talking about with the pink princess, where I cut this one right about here because it was doing what the second one I'm going to show you in a second was doing. And then I just rooted that cutting and sold it to somebody as a rooted cutting for like $2. And then I let this grow back in. And so right now it's looking all right. Now, don't get me wrong, solderoids are beautiful plants with these silvery heart-shaped leaves. This is just a baby one. The ones when they get mature, like we're talking like giant leaves. And you can get them to that point from this size if you do several things. One, give it a pull, a moss pull, something it can actually root into immediately. And number two, figure out what the heck it wants. I don't know, you guys. This is living in my IKEA greenhouse cabinet. Is currently 70% humidity in there. It's not a humidity issue. The leaf is getting stuck, the new one coming in, right there. You can see that? Like, it's stuck. It's trying to come out in the middle there, but it's stuck up at the top. It's stuck up at the bottom. This just happens nonstop on these plants. And I'm just over it. I'm just like over it. They're the biggest pain in the ass. And then they have a tendency to kill off their lower leaves really quickly, which is why you end up with this situation. This isn't attractive. Actually, that's kind of sculptural looking right there. Little bonsai shape, but not attractive. And it's not meant to be a trailing plant. That's why it's trying to still grow upright here, but it killed off all its lower leaves. So I need to chop this one again. I say again because I can see right there where I chopped it once before and just sold it off as a rooted cutting, hoping, I think, that it would sprout something off lower, and it didn't. And this one is a perfect example of leaves getting stuck inside of a leaf, inside of another leaf. Hopefully you can see all of these leaves right here that are stuck. So there's two leaves that are stuck together here because one got stuck while the other one was coming in. And then you can see some of them that have come out do not fully unfurl, or if they do, they will be deformed. It's a hot mess, you guys. It's just a hot mess of a plant. I'm over it. I see a lot of people saying online that they're over them. I think you just have to live in the perfect place for one of these to work. But even people I know in Australia who have successfully grown them on moss poles still have the issue of they kill off their lower leaves really quickly. They also tend to have a longer petiole to internodal spacing ratio as they get more mature. So you end up with a mature plant that is very bald at the bottom and then like almost looks like a tree at the top because the petioles are so long that the leaves are all sprawled out, which also makes it a total space hog. I mean, this is kind of space hogging right now too, if I'm being honest. So yeah, I'm over this plant, as am I over the Filidendrin brantianum, aka Filadindrin brandy, which is the next one on the list, which people keep mistaking this for because they look freaking ridiculously similar. Now, Filadindrin brandy is a little bit more silverish on its leaves. I feel like the green of the leaves is a little bit darker, so the silver is a little bit more noticeable, but it's a heart-shaped leaf philodendron. It is a climbing plant, but it is a plant that you will see more often than not sold as a trailing plant in a hanging basket. And when you get them at greenhouses, if you can still find them, because I never see them anymore, probably because we're all just completely over them at this point, they usually look pretty good. But when you bring them home, you start having this exact same problem of stuck leaves, deformed leaves coming in. Like, I don't care if you put it on a pole, I don't care if you try to still let it trail, the thing has issues. I have one person who has told me that theirs does great. They live in Hawaii, they sent me a cutting of theirs. I tried it. I put it in my greenhouse cabinet. I thought maybe the Hawaiian version will do better than the one I bought here in the US, but it did not. It did the exact same thing that mine that I already had did, and so I ended up selling them off to other people who hopefully can have better luck with them. But for me, this is a no-go anymore. I'm not dealing with it. I'm not selling them to anybody. Like, I'm done. Which leads us to the number one plant on our list, which probably won't surprise anybody, but it is the first plant that popped into my mind when I thought about doing this video for you guys, and that is the Filidendrin Milanochrysum, frequently referred to these days as the Filidendrin Milanochrysum, because, oh my goodness, like, this plant combines a lot of the things on the list today. So basically, everything we just talked about with the Philodendron soteroids and the Philodendron brandies, of having the stuck leaves, deformed leaves, killing off the lower leaves relatively quickly, leading to kind of a bare stem at the bottom like this. The Filidendrin Milanochrysum has a tendency to do that, but in addition to that, it has the same tendency to do what the Philodendron Pink Princess and the Philodendron Strawberry Shake do, which is put out smaller and smaller and smaller leaves. And I don't really care if you try to put this on a pole or not. If you try to put it on a pole, it better be a moss pole. Give it something to root into. But even then, I have seen countless other planty influencers, planty YouTubers express their problems with this plant, even having it on a pole with it not wanting to size up. Even Sydney Plant Guy, who we all know is notoriously well at getting plants to grow well on moss poles, has struggled with this plant. The best version of this plant I've ever seen, which is probably the one I've had up on screen for you, is from Craig Miller Randall, who does live in Australia, but this plant does not live at his home in Australia. This plant lives at his home in Belize, in the middle of the ocean, on an island, where it's loving life, where it has conditions that are nothing like our conditions. They're nothing like his conditions at his home in Australia. He has stated this in his posts about this plant before. Now, I do have a hunch that growing this plant from a more mature specimen than a small specimen, and preferably a more mature specimen that is already attached to something like a moss pole, is probably the better way to go. But at the end of the day, if you don't have the right conditions, and I'm convinced the right conditions for this plant is like, please give me 80% or higher humidity nonstop every day, all day long, odds are it is not going to go well with you, which is a shame because it is also, in my personal opinion, one of the most beautiful plants on the list today. I'm looking at the list. I'm just going to say it. It is the most beautiful plant, in my personal opinion, on the list today. I would love to own one that looked like this, but it's not happening for me. It's not happening for most people unless you live in someplace like Belize. But there you have it, you guys. Those are my top 10 plants that I will never own and never sell again. Curious if you feel the way I do about any of these plants? Comment down below and let us know. I hope you've enjoyed this video though. If so, please be sure to click that like and or subscribe button down below, and I look forward to seeing you again next time. Aloha!